Welcome, everybody. My name is Shanti Edwards. I'm a Sonoma Coast Program Manager for Sonoma Land Trust. This presentation is scheduled for about an hour, which will be followed by about 15 minutes of Q&A. You can submit your questions via the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any time during this presentation or during the Q&A. Sonoma Land Trust is a local nonprofit that protects land in Sonoma County for everyone's benefit. We've been doing this work since 1976 and have protected over 58,000 acres in our county so far. We accomplish our work through the generosity of our members and contributors and folks like you. So thanks to all of you out there helping us to protect the biodiversity of Sonoma County for future generations. The coastal lands that we'll be exploring this evening, and I'll show some photos of them, are important because they are situated within the ancestral territory of the Kashaya-Pomo, a federally recognized tribe who have an intact language and thriving culture today. SLT has a collaborative partnership with the Kashaya-Pomo to ensure tribal involvement with all of our land stewardship and conservation activities on the coast. As we pursue our mission of conserving land in Sonoma County, we recognize that we stand upon the unceded ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples. We embrace our responsibility to learn from and protect their cultural and traditional connections to the land. Tribal groups in every region of the county are Sonoma Land Trust's most important partners in the care of the ecologically significant lands that we steward. Today, we're thrilled to partner with the Wildlands Conservancy to bring Meghan Walla-Murphy of the North Bay Bear Collaborative to you to share in a conversation about the behavior and range of black bears, as well as learn what we can do to improve human behavior and human and bear interactions, human behavior as well. Sonoma Land Trust and the Wildlands Conservancy are partners in conservation and together steward the Sea to Sky Trail, which spans from the shores of the Pacific on the Jenner Headlands to the Pole Mountain summit at 2,200 feet. And this map here shows this swath of 6,300 acres of protected land that goes from the town of Jenner all the way to nearly to Casadero. Sonoma Land Trust played a lead role in protecting the Jenner Headlands, Pole Mountain and Little Black Mountain, which altogether, this mosaic of habitat types is important for allowing plants and wildlife to adapt to a changing climate. In the face of climate change, biodiversity loss, and increasing land fragmentation, it is critical to conserve large blocks of land and core habitat, as well as the connections that link these conservation lands together. Sonoma Land Trust's time with these lands began with the 12,000-acre Creighton Ridge fire of 1978, in which the Little Black Mountain Preserve was burned and subsequently donated to Sonoma Land Trust as one of our very first conservation properties. Sonoma Land Trust and our conservation partners acquired the 5,600-acre Jenner Headlands Preserve in 2009, and at the time, this was the largest conservation project in Sonoma County history. SLT owned and managed the Jenner Headlands for the first 5 years following the acquisition and developed the vision and the management plan for the ecological stewardship of the preserve, showcasing the compatibility of proactive land stewardship, working lands, and public recreation. SLT transferred the Jenner Headlands Preserve to the Wildlands Conservancy in 2003 for long-term management and public access implementation, but our partnership and role at the Jenner Headlands continues today. Here I'm displaying the map of the Sea to Sky Trail with some views that hikers might experience along the way. In 2014, we acquired the Pole Mountain Preserve, pictured here on this map at the bottom. And this property is this incredible rolling oak woodland landscape that connects the Jenner Headlands and Little Black Mountain Preserves. And at the summit at 2,200 feet is, the top at Pole Mountain, where we have the destination for the hardiest of hikers trekking the Sea to Sky Trail. And it's also the forever home for the Pole Mountain Fire Lookout. We manage these lands for climate resilience and habitat health. We're primarily working with partners on forest management for wildfire resilience and community safety. We're also using livestock grazing to promote native flora. And based on some wildlife camera footage and signs of scat, we know that we have black bears in the vicinity, utilizing the refugia of these conservation lands for autumn season foraging and when the bay nuts are ripe and food in the landscape is plentiful. I'm going to turn this presentation over now to Jill Adams, a ranger with the Wildlands Conservancy, to talk a little bit about the the care and stewardship of the Jenner Headlands Preserve and some of the bear activity that neighbors have been noticing lately. And then we'll turn it over to Megan for her informative talk about bears. So I'm going to stop share. And then over to you, Jill.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get my screen up and make sure everything is working well. Thank you so much, Shanti, and thank you to our partners at Sonoma Land Trust who helped us organize this webinar for this evening. My name is Jill. I am a ranger with the Wildlands Conservancy at Jenner Headlands Preserve along the Sonoma Coast. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us on this talk to learn more about the black bears that utilize the thousands of acres that we steward along the Sonoma Coast with Sonoma Land Trust. As Shanti mentioned, Sonoma Land Trust and the Wildlands Conservancy collaborate to provide these important wildlife corridors. And our land management practices at Jenner Headlands Preserve reflect the mission of the Wildlands Conservancy, which is to protect the beauty and biodiversity of the earth. And we provide free educational programs such as this evening's webinar. Two of my coworkers live in the Cazadero area, and they have been reporting increased bear activity in the neighborhoods. And for the last many years, we've had 8 wildlife cameras spread throughout the 5,600 acres here at Jenner Headlands Preserve. And we are picking up bear activity year round. It seems like the weather is temperate enough that they don't necessarily lay low during the winter or go into hibernation. But I am thrilled to introduce Meghan Walla-Murphy, who is going to be talking more about the bear activity in Sonoma County. Meghan is a respected wildlife ecologist, educator, and tracker. She is a lead coordinator for the North Bay Bear Collaborative, and she has been studying and tracking wildlife throughout the US and internationally for the last 20 years. And it is my great honor to introduce her in just a moment. Thank you so much. Meghan, take it away.
Thank you, Jill and Shanti and Gina. Hi, everybody. I will share my screen in just a minute, but I do just want to thank Sonoma Land Trust and the Wildlands Conservancy and all of you for taking the time to be on this call. Welcome to my office. I am in Occidental, or what we now call Occidental. And as Shanti was kind of saying, this is the land of most recently Indigenous people of the Kashaya, Southern Pomo, and they are actually part of our bear collaborative. So that feels really good to have them here. And I'm looking outside and there's redwoods and blue sky. Hurrah for the sunshine, and welcome and thank you, as I said. So let me just share my screen and off we go. Great. Well, I am really honored to be one of the leads on the North Bay Bear Collaborative, and we'll get into what that means and who are these North Bay Bear Collaborative people and what are they collaborating with, and we'll get into that. But I like to start with this slide. This is a photo I took when I was working in Yellowstone, God, maybe 10 years ago. And I love it because one of the things people are like, well, what's up with bears and why do you study bears and what do they got for us? And all these questions. And one of the things that I really love about bears and have learned to respect about them is they teach us good boundaries. And so I thought I would start with a bear story because who doesn't love a good bear story? So this was a mama bear and she was not very far off the road. And so this was like 4:30 in the morning, right around summer solstice. So way up in Montana and really light, even early in the morning. And there were these 2 little cubs and they had been playing. And so I pulled over to watch her and she's probably only 30 feet from me. So I'm watching and watching. And then she just sat down and the little ones crawled up and I was like, oh, this is such a sweet little scene that I get to see, and they're feeding. And I don't have children of my own, but maybe some of you can relate to this story. They and certainly my friends who have kids relate to it. And so these 2 little ones, they were nursing, but it seemed like they were getting bored because you could hear them start to play with each other, and one like kind of growled and mom just snarled and she's like, knock it off, is what it appeared to be to me. and they kind of quieted down, the little cubs. And then another one, they started to snarl and kind of tease each other. And one of them must have bitten her because she yelped. And then all of a sudden she stood up and the bear cubs just rolled down the hill. And I thought, oh, there's some good boundaries about behavior. And I love that Shanti said, how do we learn to change human behavior around bears? Because we're not going to change the bear's behavior, but we get to change our behavior based on what they're teaching us and the boundaries that they're giving us. And so I think if we get to go on this fun journey of learning about bears and what they're teaching and asking us, and certainly in our Sonoma, Napa, Marin County zones. So I like to start with my teachers. I've had many, many teachers over the years. As Jill said, I've been deep in this kind of wildlife relationship for decades now, since I was 23, and I'm edging up on 50. And I have had the great pleasure from traveling and working all over this incredible planet and learning really deeply from a lot of humans, but also plants and animals. So I always just like to give a nod that what I get to share with you today comes from a long legacy of people behind me. And also as part of our collaborative and just me being an educator, there's a lot of young people in front of me who are going to hopefully carry this torch and learn a lot more than I do. So just like to give a little nod to those folks. Um, and then, again, people are always like, why bears? So this is one thing that I think we can all relate to being kind of in this North Pacific coast area. We get to live in a county it was once called Salmon Nation, which was pretty much from Southern California, where the steelhead, 200 years were still pretty plentiful, all the way up the Pacific coast into Alaska and over into like Korea and Siberia and Japan. That whole kind of area was known to many, many indigenous people as Salmon Nation. And not only did indigenous humans and people now today love salmon, but bears love salmon. And they're a really important part of our ecological system. And maybe you're familiar or not, but in Sonoma County, there are many projects and a lot of eyes on our coho, Chinook, and steelhead populations as they are endangered and threatened. But they are starting to work to come back as people become more aware. And, is it coincidence that black bears are now coming back in more plentifully? And we'll give a little nod to the beavers as well that are starting to reappear in our zones. But the bears play a really important part with our fish relationship and the health of our forests. So I always just like to throw out this quote. You can go ahead and take a minute to read that, more like 10 seconds. And this is a great book. I believe this talk is being recorded, so you can check out these quotes again. But it speaks to the importance of bears in our forests. Um, Perhaps those pictures are from Tahoe, not from here, because it's not happening here yet in Sonoma County. But this is Taylor Creek in South Lake Tahoe, where there's a kokanee salmon run. They're no longer the native salmon, which were the Lahontan cutthroat trout. Imgiwata is the name of those trout in the Washoe language. But we do have a run in Taylor Creek of these sockeye salmon, and they will come up from Lake Tahoe up into Taylor Creek by the hundreds. And guess who's there to eat them is the bears. And the bears stand right on the edge and they just scoop them up. And you can see in this top left corner, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. Those are salmon eggs from a bear that had picked up a female who was big with her eggs, and it's caviar, really. So the bears are hanging out around the fish while they're coming up to spawn. And, there's so much food and such plentiful food that the bears are grabbing the fish and they just eat the heads because the brains are where so much of the fat and the protein are. So they eat the heads, but the important part of this anadromous nutrient cycle is they leave the rest of the carcasses for a suite of different species to come in. So you've got coyotes and foxes and osprey and bald eagles and the banana slugs. Well, I don't know if they're banana slugs, but the slugs come in, and all these different species are living off of the abundance that the fish are providing by spawning and that the bears are pulling out of the water. So then you get this whole kind of life verve in the forest. And if you've ever felt it, it's amazing. It's really significant. And then, kind of this cheeky question, does a bear poop in the woods? Turns out they do, and they often go way far away from the creek's edge. And they will take all of these salmon nutrients, these fish, it's basically like fish emulsion or fish compost, and they take it out into the woods, and they are spreading these nutrients deep into the forest. And what's amazing in that first quote that I showed you, that gentleman studied trees all the way up in Idaho, about, 400 or 500 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean. And when he was coring the trees, he was looking at isotopes in the trees, and lo and behold, they found marine elements in those trees over, the thousands and thousands of years, that the relationship of salmon moving into the rivers, being able to go way upstream, like all the way into Idaho, and then the bears eating the fish and taking it out into the forest and providing marine nutrients for our forest. We have no idea how our forests are going to change if we don't have that cycle continuing. What does it mean to have forests that don't have salmon nutrients if we no longer have salmon runs or the bears that are distributing those nutrients across the landscape? We don't know, but that's just one little tiny piece of how bears fit into our ecology. And I put these pictures in because right along the creek, there's all this life going on, and you'll see a lot of bear sign. And this is me many years ago sleeping in a little bear bed, or pretending to sleep in a bear bed. So that's a little bit of an ecological perspective, but there's also this very deep, long relationship that humans and bears have shared over thousands and thousands of years. And again, I'll just give you a couple seconds to read this quote. And this is a beautiful, beautiful book, Giving Voice to Bear. It looks at human relationships all across North America. Another really beautiful book to take a look at is The Sacred Paw, and that looks at a relationship that humans in the Northern Hemisphere have had with bears. If you have ancestry from the Northern Hemisphere, it is likely that somewhere in that legacy of your ancestors, people were in relationship with bears, because it turns out all across the Northern Hemisphere, bears are a big force on the landscape. And so that you probably somewhere in your ancestry had a relationship, which I think is really cool. In all of those places across the Northern Hemisphere, whether I'm studying like the Carpathian Mountains in Slovakia, or the relationship of the old brown bears in Ireland, or in Korea, or the Inuit people with the polar bears, or what we can now call grizzly bear in Colorado, there's these stories of how bears taught humans what to eat, how to survive through the cold, and what medicines were good for us and how to heal. So here's a picture of a bear digging roots, and this is a picture of a young Yurok woman digging a osha root, which is a really powerful medicine for colds and congestion. And we now dig those roots here in California from what we have been taught by the bears, and then subsequently elders have taught me that. Our language is also really deeply intertwined. Our stars. In that book, The Sacred Paw, there's a whole chapter on how many of our words are stemming from either the sound that bears make, or even the word bear. So if you think about, can you bear it? Or barren, or birth, that sound, Ursula. Maybe someone has a friend named Ursula. That all comes and goes all the way back to our relationship with bears. And then, of course, bears like to celebrate. They are very playful and curious and funny creatures, which is one of the reasons I love them. This is a painting taken, I believe, from the UK about bear dances and ceremonies. But this kind of idea of bear dances, celebrations, and healings happen all over, again, the Northern Hemisphere. And the top left is a beautiful bronze statue as a tribute to the Chumash bear dance, which is a big tribe in Southern California, and I've been gifted enough to be invited to it, and it's very powerful. If you get a chance to be invited to a bear celebration, I encourage it. The middle is a mask for the Haida of the Pacific Northwest. And then, we have polar bears that are dancing and such. So these bear dances were happening all over. The Ainu had really deep rites of passage and bear celebrations. The Ainu are the indigenous people in Japan. Um, Korea believes that all of their citizens were birthed from the bear woman, so they are all related to the bear in some way. And you could go on into Siberia and, just study maybe your place of origin and check out like what was the relationship with bears, and I think you'll be fascinated. So most of the photos in here are of black bears. Ursus americanus, that is the bear that is now currently in California. But this top left picture over here, the picture I took again when I was working in Yellowstone, and that is the grizzly bear. And sadly, there are no longer grizzly bears in California. The last grizzly bear kind of known to exist in California was 1924. So we're in our 100-year anniversary of the extinction of the California grizzly. You can see now that this is the last kind of real holdout of where they are. There is a little bit of this area where they're expanding into Idaho and a little bit over here in Centennial Valley where I've gotten to work. There's possibly a little go back and forth. And there's a thought that they might be able to come down through British Columbia, through the Cascade Mountains. But grizzly bears historically came from all the way from Alaska down into central Mexico. And we're missing them now for sure. They were purposely killed out when colonization happened and oppression of not only our indigenous people, but of animals. It was bounties were put out to kill grizzlies. It was for livestock safety, a lot of entertainment. They would pit bulls and grizzly bears against each other. There was an enormous, in our area, in the Bay Area, there was an enormous grizzly kill to dry meat to send off to the gold rush. All kinds of different stories for that. And this is not a grizzly bear talk, but I'm happy to answer questions later if you've got them. So this is kind of ironically the only place that we see our grizzly bears anymore. What a bummer. So let's talk about black bears now, because black bears are here. So Sonoma County, with the exception of kind of like Wallala, Annapolis, maybe edging down into Cazadero, but that's even a little bit more recent. But like Annapolis, Wallala area, that northwest corner of Sonoma County, did have black bears. But most of Sonoma County, as far as we can figure out, was grizzly bear country, including like Napa and Marin, big grizzly bear country, some of the highest densities coupled with Southern California of grizzly populations in California. And then maybe you've heard the quote, nature abhors a vacuum. So with the extirpation of grizzlies, there were no bears here for a while. And so sometimes I'll talk to some elders and old timers here, and they'll be like, nah, there's no bears in Sonoma County, because they have grown up in a period that was after the grizzlies, but before the return of these black bears. Or I don't even say return, before kind of the range expansion of the black bears into Sonoma County. From the early 90s, the black bear population in California has been increasing. And we have a little bit more recent data, although it hasn't been published, that there's well over 45,000 black bears in California now. And they are on the move. They are expanding their ranges. So here is a kind of old map. It doesn't really include, look at here, Sonoma County doesn't really have them. Marin doesn't, and Napa barely, but here's a much better recent map. The thing that this map is missing is Point Reyes, and I'll get into how we know that there's bears down in Point Reyes, but black bears are here, and that is no longer kind of a novelty to see them. So this is a quote from a friend and colleague of mine, Jim Coleman. He is a grassland rangeland botanist, but he also lives at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, where I have some friends who are up there. And this was like back in 2013 or 2014, and he sent us this email. And I just love this quote, so I use it over and over again. And my favorite part of it is, the bears just see our fridges and freezers and gardens as part of their ecosystem. And It's absolutely true, right? They are not making a distinction between your fence line and their forest, right? They're like, oh, great. You have compost? Wonderful. What a great place for food. Oh, you have an orchard? Wonderful. And now I'm going to take it back to where I'm bedding down tonight. And I also really appreciate we are humbly made to understand a little bit more about our relationship with the forces of nature. Bears are a force of nature. They are here, they are smart. They're also a little bit of scaredy bears, they're shy animals. So there is much to discuss here. And so I'm thankful you guys are here to learn. Oops, I don't know where this went. Okay, there we go. So bear sightings are the norm. I get many emails a week, really, of photos and, oh, we saw a bear here, or they're coming in through a lot of the wildlife cameras and the Ring, like front door cameras that people have. They'll be like, wow, we saw a bear walk across our front yard. So they're here, and as of now, they're not habituated. They haven't been getting into too much trouble. But I was just talking to somebody like the bear tsunami is on its way. And this kind of brings us into the North Bay Bear Collaborative. In 2016, we had our first evidence that the black bears were not just passing through, they were actually um, uh, certainly residing here, but they were also reproducing, and we got a mama bear with cubs. And so a bunch of us, there was maybe 6 or 7 different people, came together and we're like, huh, wow, we know that the bears are residing here. They're actually having cubs and mating and all of that. How do we get prepared for the bears to come? Because we really don't want to recreate a system that's happening like in Tahoe or Mammoth or Yosemite. So we are trying to be on the forward edge of this bear movement that's happening. And Breck Parkman, he was at that meeting, and he was then the California state archaeologist. And he asked this question: how do we bring back, or how do we help to member a bear culture in the North Bay? And so that's kind of been our mission and our leading principle is we want to build a bear culture that the kids that are in 6th grade now know that you don't leave trash out, or that you take your bird feeders down at certain times of year, or, don't leave your barbecues out with lots of meat on them, things like that. We want that to just be second nature, as it is in places in Colorado or Connecticut or BC, right? So that was started in 2016. And then in 2017, as maybe many of you know, we had a lot of fires coming through. And so our focus got pulled away from looking at bears. But then all that time, 2017, 18, 19, I was starting to get a lot of still calls about there's bears, and people were really interested. So I started asking all of these different members, are you interested in being part of our bear collaborative or a bear collaborative? And Melanie Parker from Sonoma County Regional Parks, she put up some money to get it going. And we now meet regularly since 2019. And you can see I'm really proud of all of our different members. We have a very diverse stakeholder group. We are truly a collaborative. We are not a nonprofit. We are not a corporation. This is nobody's full-time work. This is, we all get to come together and talk about how do we build a bear culture from our different perspectives. So we have tribal membership, we have regional parks, state parks, national parks, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, UC Davis. We have vineyard owners because bears love grapes, people. It's really, I'm happy to tell you all kinds of funny grape stories. Kevin Lunny of Lunny Ranch in Point Reyes, he is one of our members and really representing like the Farm Bureau and ranchers, because they will be hit by this bear tidal wave that we're talking about. And of course, Sonoma Land Trust and Wildlands Conservancy. And I'm actually seeing that they're not on this list. I apologize. Obviously, you guys are in collaboration. I think this slide I made before we signed off, so I apologize about that. So the way that we do that a lot is by sharing story. It's really fun to hear about the bears and talk about it. We're teaching people to track bears and map them as they're tracking them. A lot of education, and we have a good research program about collecting DNA through scat. So if you are interested in learning how to track bears and collecting scat for DNA, give us an email, because we're going to be doing 3 trainings this year. We also have a multi-year Tribal Youth Bear Project. One is with the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center, and the second one is with the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians. And so here we are out in the Kashaya Coastal Reserve. We also work up there at the Rancheria, and we have a ton of fun. In this project, our youth we meet at least once a month for an entire year, and they're learning a lot about what do bears eat. And then, of course, not of course, but often that coincides with what humans are eating. And so we're really looking at that intersection of wildlife and forage and habitat and human foods and indigenous foodways, and how can we, restore and enhance the land and open space for both bears and humans. So the students are learning how to do vegetation transects. They're and this year, because we're in our 3rd year, we're getting to start to do restoration projects. They've been doing seed collection. We're also doing wildlife camera research. So we're starting to learn not just who the bears are, but who are the bears living with, and then ecology and physiology of the bears. And we laugh a lot because bears are funny. This is one of the tribal youth projects. This is with the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. And we are, as a collaborative, looking at what is the relationship of bears and certainly other wildlife with fire. That's a whole topic that I'm not going to drop into here because we can go deep into it. I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but it's worth checking out, and it's a pretty interesting relationship. It's often surprising. So here's our DNA project. We do in the field training and collection. We're estimating bear populations, dispersal, what they eat. And our favorite part is the relatedness. Which bears are related to who, and who's the grandmother of this cub that's showing up in Petaluma. And we're actually hoping to be able to, in a couple years, to put together bear family trees. One of my professors and mentors that I worked with in Yellowstone, he has those bear family or he has wolf family trees, because he helped in the reintroduction of wolves. And I'm like, oh, well, that's brilliant. So we're hoping to do that with bears. We right now are in year 5 of this project, and we're really proud of that as well. All the collaboratives are pitching in. We have a lot of individuals. Just volunteers and people calling up and saying, hey, I've got some bear scat in my backyard. Do you guys want to come and get it? And off goes our emergency scat collection team. So I really want like a fun t-shirt that says emergency scat collection. But if anyone's interested in helping us design that, let me know. So quickly, we're going to get into some track and signs so you can start to understand maybe you do have a bear that's living near you in your backyard. And here is some sign that might look and characteristics of them. So they come in all different colors. They are called black bears, but they can be blonde, like, white. Sometimes those are called spirit bears. Cinnamon color, this reddish, beautiful hue, browns, and blacks. They typically have a lighter muzzle. They can get up to, 500 pounds if it's a male, although we have all heard of Hank the Tank, who is really Henrietta the Tank, and she was over 500 pounds. And females are typically smaller and weigh about half as much. They live a long time, which is really cool because there's a lot of generational information that they're passing down to their cubs, but also it gives us a good amount of time to learn about individuals. Here's what bare feet look like. Full disclosure, these are grizzly bear feet. I don't have a picture of black bear feet, but I could probably get one. I just keep forgetting and the slide works. So they have 5 toes like humans, but if you can all kind of put your mind's eye on your toes, or maybe even wiggle your toes and start to become really focused on your big toe, and then move your big toe to where your pinky is, like in your imagination. So if you imagine not your pinky finger, but your pinky toe, your little toe, where your little toe is, that's where a bear's big toe is. So their big toe is on the outside of their foot. But other than that, sometimes you can walk around and you'll be like, huh, who's that barefooted human walking around here? And then you'll be like, oh, It's a bear. So they have feet, they can leave footprints very similar to ours. Here's what their front foot tracks look like. These are the best of the best kinds of tracks. These were all taken in Sonoma County or Napa County. You can kind of see those 5 toes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, big toe right there. So that would be a left foot. Food preferences. Maybe one of the reasons that I love bears is because they love to eat and I love to eat. And maybe that's why they love the North Bay, because we are such a foodie county, which is so funny. So bears are led by their noses. They have these big long noses and an incredible sense of smell, like they can smell for a couple miles away. But I'm sorry, not their bears. Their noses are led by their bellies. So their bellies and hunger is driving where they're going to go. So if you want to know where the bears are, you have to start to think, well, where is the food? So our bears, like I was saying, are not habituated yet, which is great. And they're still largely in our open spaces and wildlands and eating native wild foods, which is really important. That is the goal. Sonoma County and our North Bay area has a lot of open space. Even though it might be privately owned, it is still open and it has a lot of food for these bears. They're doing okay. And what we want to do is keep them out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that's always surprising to people, or often surprising, is that they eat about 85% herbivores. Like they eat tons and tons and tons of vegetation. So it's kind of incredible that a big 400-pound male is eating what, like we see in this top left picture, grass. So this time of year, before all the berries and the fruits has come up, the bears are like lawnmowers and they're just grazing, grazing, grazing and eating all these forbs and nettles and clover and all of that. And yeah, it's amazing. And then as the fruits ripen, they start to eat tons of berries. These are pin cherry from Southern California. They get into the orchards. There's all kinds of different foods that they're eating. And then if you follow that through, they're eating acorns, bay nuts. This was a bear that had been seen walking down Fulton Road, oh no, Stony Point Road, and was walking south towards 3rd Street and got to the Santa Rosa Creek Trail and hooked a right. And on this journey, this young dispersing male, because we did get a picture of him, was eating plums. And, kind of in May, June, you might see all these little plums that are green, yellow, and then they turn to a nice blush pink. Well, if you can imagine, you're a young dispersing bear, and you're kind of like a teenager and you're hungry, but you don't quite know how to cook your own food or where to find the really good stuff. So you just start eating hundreds of underripe plums. And so this poor bear, just about every 200 feet, was evacuating this kind of scat. And so these are filled with hundreds of plum seeds, but also, I don't know, sometimes I've eaten too many cherries. Maybe you guys have done that too, and your belly's like, oh, what did I do? That was probably what was happening with this bear. So their food preferences are driven by whatever food is available, really. But they have all these fun other signs that they leave. So not just scat is a sign, but they love to bite trees. So black bears and forests are intertwined. They're really important for the health of the forest, and trees are dependent, or bears are dependent on the trees. So this is a picture of my friends Preston and Ginny. We were out at Modini Mayakama Preserve and Audubon Canyon Ranch open space area. And the bears, we found this bear sign, and this was a big male, and he has bitten the top of the tree off. So they will leave this sign of breaking and biting saplings off. And then they'll also scratch them. So you can kind of see there's some scratch marks here. And this is a communication, and we don't know what they're saying, but it happens a lot, and it's pretty neat. And when they do that, you'll also, like I said, you'll find those scratch marks. And then here, when they break the branches off, they leave these great little nubs. And if you can see, there's hair here because like I said, bears love to play, but they also really like comfort and indulgence, and they take baths and they like to roll around and give themselves like massages and back scratches. So bear will come up here because they've got a big shaggy coat, and they will rub up and down on these little broken branches, and it feels good if you've ever had a back scratch. They also will bite big trees. This is another kind of communication. So instead of breaking the tops off saplings, they will come up and bite trees. So if you could imagine, I don't know if you can see me right now, but if there was a if there's a tree behind my back and I am a bear, they come up and they take their arms and they wrap it around the tree, and they turn their heads and they use their incisors and they bite into the tree and they pull out. So if you can see my cursor, these marks are not claw marks, but they're incisor marks. And the bear has clamped their teeth around the edge of the tree and pulled out. This is another form of communication. It's usually males doing it. Again, we don't know what they're saying, but it happens a lot. So females do it as well, not as often as males, though. Bears love telephone poles. So if this is something else, if you're curious, is there a bear around and you have some open space with a telephone pole, I would go check it out. One of the things I believe is, there's two reasons I believe that this is so. This telephone pole stands out in this big meadow, right? And if it's standing out to you and I, you can absolutely believe it's standing out to all of wildlife. And so that becomes like a signpost. So if you're trying to leave a message, you're going to target those signposts so that your message goes far and wide. It's kind of like the social media of wildlife. So here's that telephone pole. And you can see here is a bear bite, and there's a little bit of bear hair there. And this was another telephone pole within that same line. This is my friend Lisa Moulton. We're out tracking bears, and she's a good 5'9", 5'10". She's not short by any means, much taller than me. And this is a bear bite up here. Like, this is a tall bear. If its head is right up there, like the head is probably there, the incisors there, and it's pulling out. So check out telephone poles. I know that sounds funny, but there was a reporter who wanted to know more about bears, and I took him out to Sugarloaf and found the telephone poles, and there was a ton of sign. It was super fun. So beyond leaving messages within their trees, black bears use trees as babysitters, which is just the cutest, most endearing thing ever. And this gets into a little bit about the bear life cycle. So a mama bear, she goes into a den, and our bears on the Pacific Coast don't really do a true hibernation. They might take some long naps, but because we have food available all year round, they're not really going into hibernation unless the mom is pregnant, and she's going to give birth. So she will go into the den, and during that time, she doesn't eat or drink or defecate, right? And so she's in there and she gives birth, and typically to two cubs. And those two little cubs, when they come out, they're just a couple ounces. They're just tiny, tiny, tiny little things. And they crawl up her belly and they find her nipples and they start to nurse. And so all three of them are still deep in this cave in the middle of winter, and dreaming away. And bears do dream, it turns out. So how cute is that? And then spring comes, and right about now is when we're starting to see the emergence of cubs and mamas. And so she comes out, and these cubs are now like the size of puppies, like young puppies. And so she comes out and she is starving, right? Not only has she been asleep and not eating or drinking for months, but she's been nursing. So she's very, very depleted. But yet she's got these little, very vulnerable critters with her. And so she can't eat and put all her focus on nourishing herself and watch her cubs. So she uses the trees. And I have seen this, and it's just about the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And she'll go up and she teaches them and how to go up the tree, and she sends them up the tree. And up they go, and they sleep, and they find these big branches and they hang out in the tree. And she goes off and she feeds for a certain amount of time. And I don't know if she feels the calling, usually the bears are pretty quiet. because they don't want to attract attention to themselves. The cubs are quiet. And she'll come down and she'll like hit the bottom of the tree, and the little baby bear cubs come down, and then she nurses and they hang out and they play and they move to their next foraging place. And so these trees become babysitters, so she can go about with her business, and the bear cubs are safe. Den sites, I think we have this kind of vision that den sites are deep in the ground, but they look all different ways. Like you can see this top left one, it's actually even open to the sky above. Sometimes they're under a lot of debris piles. Sometimes they're dug out. We don't know very much about the den sites in Sonoma County, so that's something we're hoping to learn more about. So that's a very quick review of bears. But so we live with them. It's great. They're smart. They have such this amazing different kind of language, behavior, so much that to be admired. And they can be a force, like I said, and they're really challenging. They have very dexterous hands. I've seen bears like unzip things. There's all kinds of tales of bears in Yosemite that I'm not going to get into right now. But the best strategy, bar none, of living with bears is to remove any kind of a food attractant that's going to bring the bears to your place, and then they associate your home as a source of food. It's okay. It's pretty easy to keep a bear away. It's very hard to teach them to forget that you are a source of food, not you yourself. They're not eating humans, but they might be really excited about the trash you left out the night before. So our best bet is to just not let them ever learn that you might have food for them. There's lots of different ways to do this. We are working with really diligently to try and get Recology on board so that we can have bear-proof trash cans. They have already been amenable to start changing some of the routes where we know that there's a lot of bear interaction, so that people don't have to leave their trash out the night before. So instead of picking up trash at 5:30 and those kind of bear human interfaces, people are now being able to put their trash out in the morning and not get it picked up till midday. We're also working a lot with infrastructure and campsites. Sonoma County Regional Parks is working with Recology. They're going to do a trial of 6 different bear-proof dumpsters. And really, we're hoping to get this expanded throughout the North Bay, because this is our best bet. Bearsmart.com is an amazing website to learn all about these mitigation strategies. I really look forward to you guys going there. They're very happy to have you cut and paste and send information out. They want to keep the bears safe and humans safe, so check them out. Another really great website is bearwise.org. Bears like bird feeders, so if we know that the bears are active in your area, they will absolutely go for bird food. Seeds are high protein and high fat, so be aware of that. Please, for the sake of everybody, don't feed your pets outside. Feed them indoors or in a locked place where it's not an attraction. Compost it hasn't yet become a challenge in the North Bay, but in other places where there are bears, it is. So again, those 2 websites have all kinds of different designs on how to do bear-proof composting. This one over here on the right, it's very elaborate. I know I'm not going to probably have that kind of compost system in my backyard, but they have lots of different designs, so don't get discouraged if like, I'm never going to do that and I want to compost. Don't worry about it. There's lots of options. Keeping food out of your car. This poor bear accidentally, the door closed when, I don't know if it's a male or female. Excuse me, hold on. Was breaking into this car and the door closed, and then it was like, oh my God, I'm stuck and I can't get out. This is a real thing in Tahoe. I often work up there, and there was a late snow last mid-May, and I had been up there, and I woke up and there was like an inch of snow on the roads, and you could see these beautiful mama bear tracks, because there were little cubs right around her, and she tested every door on the road, and excuse me, and the ones that were not locked, the door, when I woke up at like 7 in the morning, excuse me, the doors were wide open. And she knew, and she like opened the glove boxes. They are smart. Sorry. I'm just so overwhelmed by bears. Keeping your grill clean, ooh, is important. And bear deterrence. So bear spray, I don't carry bear spray when I am in a place. Hold on, let me just take a minute. I feel like I'm rushing. And breathe, and that way I can talk to you better. Great, thanks. So some people ask me about bear spray. I don't carry bear spray when I'm in black bear country. It doesn't feel necessary. And quite literally, the most danger that I've seen bear spray happen to is for humans. Often they trigger it, they spray it in their car, in their house, and it is like tear gas, right? You'll have to evacuate your house if bear spray goes out in your house. So, if you do decide you feel like safer with bear spray, please learn how to use it. Make sure you're not spraying into the wind, understand how to aim it. It also goes bad, so you have to continue to buy new canisters. Down here is another kind of deterrent. This is often seen around chicken coops. Bears you saw those bare feet. They have really sensitive literally bare feet. And so putting up kind of things like with nail boards, they won't go towards your chicken coops. And so that's a good way to keep them out of places. Electric fences are very, very effective. Their noses are really sensitive. They depend on their noses for survival, as well as their hands and paws are very sensitive. So they avoid electric fences. It's been shown to be very effective for beehives, orchards, livestock, chickens, all of that kind of stuff. And both of those websites I told you about, Bear Smart and Bear Wise, have ways to how do you set up electric fences. And we, as a collaborative, are happy to help you with that. And Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, who is also one of our members, is really happy to help with that kind of setup as well. Really, for me, the most important part of navigating how we live and build a bear culture is sharing what you learn. Like, get the information out there. Like I said, there's a lot of people that don't believe that there are bears in Sonoma County or don't know that there are bears in Sonoma County, Napa, or Marin County. And they are here. And our best bet to living peacefully and really allowing these bears to flourish and for our culture to come back is to share the knowledge, share the stories, get the information out there. It's important that we figure out a way to coexist. There's a lot of tragic history, as we learned with the grizzly bears in California. And so here we have an opportunity to correct that wrong and see, can we bring back a suite of animals in our open spaces that we get to be around? I don't believe that it has to be exclusive. I think that there's integration. It happened for most of human history, as we saw, and we now have an opportunity. We get to be, all of you, as we're learning. We're on the forward wave of learning about black bears in Sonoma County and the North Bay. And I just really encourage you to figure it out, ask questions. If you want to come volunteer with us, that would be great. We need a ton of help. Like I said, this is a true collaborative. We're going along as or we're learning as we go along. So come figure it out with us. So with that, that's what I got. So, nope, 5 minutes early even, right? Thank you. I'm gonna just stop sharing and I think turn it back over to Jill and Shanti and open up to questions. And thanks for being patient with my coughing.
Okay, so thank you, Megan. That was super informative. I really appreciate you giving a thorough overview of the richness and the history and the kind of the local context of black bears in our neighborhood. And so it's great to congregate everyone together. I do see some questions in the chat. I want to first, before we launch into questions, tell you about another webinar and invite you to engage with our groups. So to stay connected with Sonoma Land Trust, the Wildlands Conservancy, and the North Bay Bear Collaborative, you can look at the websites that are linked on this page. And all three of these groups are nonprofit organizations, which means that we rely on donations from individuals, businesses, foundations, and people like you. So all of the support makes our work possible. We'd love to hear more from you and encourage you to get involved, and just thank you so much. Before we launch into Q&A, I'm going to show you an announcement for a presentation that's coming up next week as part of our Language of the Land series. You can sign up on our website on our outings page, and I encourage you to learn more about habitat conservation in Chile with a conservationist who is traveling and visiting Sonoma Land Trust with us this week. So on to the Q&A session. I'm going to go into the, actually we'll go into the chat because I think so many people were asking questions there. Actually, no, I'm going to go into Q&A. Here we go. So I'm just going to start with one since it's the first one that popped up. How do we know that bears dream? This is super fascinating.
One, there's lots and lots of indigenous stories from all around the Northern Hemisphere talking about the relationship of bears dreaming and stories like that. But often there are cameras in bear dens to find out what are the bears doing in the dens, and they have like REM and all of those kinds of stuff going on too. And then, I mean, that could be a whole nother talk. So I'm gonna leave it at that for right now, but it's amazing and pretty fascinating. And yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Another question came up. Where are the most bears spotted in Sonoma County? And then what email can we reach out to be a part of the bear scat training?
Yeah, so that's great. You can reach either me through my own website, which is meganwallamurphy.com, or you can go to our website for North Bay Bear Collaborative, which is beingwithbears.org. And then there'll be an info button you can hit there. So where are most bears seen in the North Bay? So right now, the highest density of bears in the North Bay is the northern Mayakama Mountains, and especially kind of that nexus where Napa, Sonoma, and Lake County comes together. But they are expanding and their range is moving down in the Mayacamas. Mendocino and Humboldt counties have some of the highest densities of bears in certainly in California, but in North America. And so we're in that natural range expansion for them to start moving southward.
Okay, so along the lines of kind of where are the bears in Sonoma County, we have a question about how many bears are thought to live in Sonoma County, and is there an active tagging program? Somebody else is asking, are they in Occidental? They want to know. So just kind of how many and where are they? You just mentioned they're in the Mayacamas.
Yeah,
What about
so
West County? What do we know about that?
yeah, so the number of bears, that was why we started our initial DNA project. CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, wanted to kind of get a population estimate for the North Bay. And they did the first 2 years of that project, and we have now continued it, and we're moving into 5 years. So we can definitely say that there are over 70 bears within Sonoma and Napa County. We know that there's probably about at least 5 bears now living in Marin County separately, but that number is really grossly underestimated. In like a preserve like Wild Lake Dunn, over 2 years, we had at least 30 individuals that we were able to determine from our DNA project. So it's a good amount. We don't know. Stay tuned. Like that's what this DNA project is. So we just sent in 250 more scat samples that we don't have the analysis on yet, which will kind of round out the last 2 years. Yeah, we have a sponsor a scat program if you're really interested. And it costs $150 per scat sample to get it analyzed up at UC Davis. So if you are curious and want to know about the DNA project and find out a certain, we'll give you the information for the scat stuff. So sponsor scat, because that will help us to get it all analyzed. Yes, there are bears near Occidental, Willow Creek. They're moving around. West County definitely has a bear or two. It's not a super high density like it is in the Mayacamas.
Thank you, Megan. Another question here. Are there bear and mountain lion interactions?
That is a great question. I love that question. Thanks for whoever asked that. Yes, there's actually really fascinating interaction. It first was kind of brought to the spotlight way back in like 2012-ish through a mountain lion diet study that was being done in Colorado, where the researcher Mark Elbrock was doing this diet study and collaring lions, and he saw, and he would put a camera up on kill sites, and he saw that black bears were pushing mountain lions off of their kill. They were not killing the deer, but they were kind of pushing mountain lions off. And so maybe many of you are familiar with the Living with Lions project with Dr. Quentin Martins, who's also a friend and colleague. And he is finding the same thing happening here in the North Bay. With cameras on, if he's using, let's say, deer roadkill to try and trap a lion to collar it. He said, I think it's something like 99% of the time, those kill sites are co-opted by black bears. So there's a question of, has that always been going on and we just know it now because we have wildlife cameras? Is it some kind of question about there's not enough forage out there? We don't know, but yes, there's some really fascinating information. Bears are not great hunters, but they can definitely push their weight around.
Okay, so somebody is asking about bear bells helping when out hiking to avoid conflict.
Yeah, so black bears, I think, well, let me first be really totally transparent. There is a question about like, do bear bells actually attract bears? Because they're curious and they're like, what does that sound? I don't know people who use a lot of bear bells for black bears in that situation. It's usually a practice with grizzly bears. If you do get to see a bear, my first kind of recommendation is like, wow, that's amazing. I've been working when tracking bears in the North Bay for now since 2015, and I have never seen a bear in person. That's not to say that there aren't lots of people who have, but the likelihood is pretty astonishing. So if you get to see one, that would be my first response. Then it really is a question of paying attention. What is their body language telling you? Bears have an amazing array of very clear communication, from like ear position, snapping the jaws, the hackles going up, they'll square off to you. Just as if a dog did that to you, you would back off and back away. So it's the same with bears. And you want to make yourself, and then if the bear doesn't back off and back away, you want to make yourself really big and loud. It's totally appropriate to shout, throw things at the bear, haze the bear. That's one of my recommendations if there's bear in your trash. Like, a lot of people are worried about hurting the bears. You are not going to hurt these bears. I have seen bear cubs fall 20 feet from a like top of a tree and then bounce back up and they're like, woohoo! And bears are thick-skinned, thick-boned. They are rugged. Wildlife is really remarkably resilient. So it actually is safer and better for the bear if we haze them now. So don't be afraid to like, bears throw their weight around. And I started this off by saying good boundaries. It's up to us, as Shanti was saying, to have our human behavior also have good boundaries and make sure they don't associate us with easy food. I don't know if there's another question.
Yeah, there's definitely more questions. Thank you for that. Sorry if you can hear my dog in the background barking, but someone wrote in about raising sheep, and they have a perimeter fence plus electric fencing. There was kind of a question about whether black bears would go for the lambs or the adults, but then also, is there a type of electric fence that would actually keep out a black bear? I know you kind of spoke to that a bit, that they have sensitive noses, but is there a particular style of electric fence, or do you have to have it on a higher voltage, or can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I will say I am not an electric fence aficionado, so there are people who are going to be better equipped to answer like the voltage of the fence. I will say the people I know who are using electric fencing and having livestock, it's the same electric fence that they're using for grazing and when they're moving it around. Like they don't have a separate system for predator control than what they use normally. I don't know if that's helpful. As far as black bears going after sheep and lambs and goats and things like that, it does happen, but it's very rare. Like I was saying, like black bears are not great hunters. They're big, they're stocky, they can get up to 40 miles an hour, but that's like running downhill for a very short period of time. Mountain lions are amazing hunters. Um, so that's why the electric fencing tends to work for our black bears. The other thing is guardian dogs are very, very effective for bears. So that coupling of electric fence and guardian dogs is a great way to do it. And similarly, like with mountain lions, if you have the option of bringing your animals into an enclosed space, that's really where the safety happens.
Excellent. So we have a question from one of our neighbors about what rural landowners can do in terms of forest stewardship to support bears in their habitat.
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because that's one of the things that we as the Bear Collaborative are really hoping that an outcome of bear awareness brings. Bears are like these outcome or like these icons of wild spaces and open spaces. And this kind of ties in with the fire. One of the things that I often hear is saying, oh, the fire is pushing the bears into urbanized places. And what we're finding is that's just not so. A lot of the places where fire has gone through, even really hot canopy stand replacing fires, are increasing diversity. And in that, they're increasing a lot more bear food. Those areas that have become really dense forests don't have a lot of food for a lot of wildlife. And so fire comes through and there's this diversity of wild foods that come up. A place that I've seen that happen is in Modini Mayacamas, where it was just dog hair thicket of pine and that went away. And then there was like all of a sudden bulbs that the bears were able to dig up. And there was elderberry and the huckleberry came back and currants came back. So to your question, what we as rural landowners or can do is how do we steward our lands for a diversity of wild foods? So that would include madrone, manzanita, acorn, bay nut, all the berries. The bears are loving the berries. Huckleberry is a really great way. I know, we're talking about Jenner and Little Black Mountain and Olive Pole Mountain and all of those places. Huckleberries, oh, they love the huckleberries. So opening up spaces where there can be patchy sunlight so those plants can thrive. Just really stewarding for diversity is going to be important. Also, having places where there's water access. So now we get into water salmon relationship. And I love that. And I did see, because it kind of integrates with this, I saw a question about has Sonoma County thought about planting native species on that urban wildlife interface. And that is something that the I don't know that it's been spoken about at the county level, but it's certainly spoken about in our collaborative, of which we have many, many county members. They're called bear buffers. And these were things that were used all over with the brown bears in Europe. I'm getting a lot of information. Colorado, Boulder has started to set up bear buffers, where the study looks at how are bears kind of getting into this urban areas and the neighborhoods. And in those places, those kind of corridors, what we have been seeing and what we're proposing is that would be where you plant your berries. And that would be where the, even orchards and apple trees, so that while the bears are walking trying to get into the trash, they're like, oh, look, there's blackberries here. And then they go laterally away from that direct route into the cities. And somewhere up in British Columbia, they've been doing that with grizzly bears for about 20 years around campgrounds. They have these really thick, really fecund berry bushes, and the bears hit those first, and then they just ignore um, the campground. And I will also say that is coupled with a really intense hazing. So the bears over generations, because I said they're long-lived, over generations learn like, oh, this food is better, and I don't get shouted at and harassed when I go into the campground. And then they will teach their cubs. There's a very strong lineage of mama bears teaching cubs proper behavior. So we have to be part of that too. So I love those questions. Thank you. That's the ultimate goal.
That's great. Thank you again, Megan. I just want to anecdotally share that the Wildlands Conservancy and Sonoma Land Trust, we manage our lands with prescribed burns, and we at Jenner Headlands Preserve, we've been clearing out and creating a shaded field break along our East Ridge. And that's where I've seen some of the most productive huckleberries is in that strip along the shaded field break. So just one of the ways that our land management practices help support biodiversity, but also create fire resiliency. So it's great when those two things can actually coincide and support each other. So there's another question here. Somebody's asking, does the North Bay Bear Collaborative also operate in Mendocino? And is there a similar group up there?
To my knowledge, there's not a similar group. We don't work in Mendocino. We're pretty stretched thin just by our 3 little counties. Like I said, this is nobody's full-time work, and we don't actually have a budget. All the money and funding that comes is just little individual piles. With that said, the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy, which is based out of Wallala, is talking about joining our collaborative because they have access to a lot of land up in that northwest area where we know there's a historical population of black bears. And they were really curious. They're like, well, how come you don't go into Mendocino? And can we do that? And, could we help them to figure out how to do that? So stay tuned, but to my knowledge, there's not another bear group in Mendocino, even though you guys have a lot of bears up there.
All right. So there's a question about a bear that climbed a redwood in downtown Petaluma last year.
Yeah.
A question about what happened in that scenario.
Yeah. So one of the things that becomes really important, and this goes back to bears and trees, not only baby bears use trees for safety, but adult bears use black bears use trees for safety. Like that is their first defense. They're not fast like deer to run away. And so what they do when they feel threatened and scared is they go straight up a tree and they hunker down in there until they feel safe. So when that happens, our best bet is to let people know that there's a bear around, but then to back off so that bear feels safe enough to come down and walk away. In that case, that bear did come down. CD of California Department of Fish and Wildlife was on the scene, and they escorted it into open space. So, and there was also a San Anselmo bear. That's often what happens. The Department of Fish and Wildlife does not relocate bears. It has been a really ineffectual program, and often the bear that is relocated ends up dead, either trying to get back to home and hit on roads, or because they are so dependent on a sense of place and what they're taught by their mothers what to eat. If they're dropped in a new place, they often don't know what to eat and will starve to death. So I think someone had asked about tagging. We are not tagging bears. It's about hazing the bear, teaching the bear, and us changing our behavior with the bears. And in that, that's really important because if we don't take care of our attractants and that bear continues and comes in and gets habituated, often that bear ends up as a dead bear. And because that becomes the last resort. because we don't relocate bears typically.
Okay. Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, there's another question. I know we're at 8:15. I see that. Maybe just really quickly, since what spurred on this webinar was our neighbors in Cazadero seeing bear activity sometimes nightly. And so what specifically can those folks do now that there is a bear in the neighborhood? And would you recommend them getting in touch with Recology, putting some pressure on them to help speed along adapting the trash bins to be more bear proof, or what can you recommend?
Yes, please put pressure on Recology. I'm not sure that was very politically correct, but help us. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Feel free to reach out or send me an email and we can talk in more detail. The thing about it, even if Recology doesn't start to use bear-proof trash cans, changing the time when you're able to put your trash out does really wonders. If the trash is picked up in the middle of the day rather than in the early morning, encouraging your neighbors not to put the trash out and to keep it in locked spaces. um as we said, the idea is not to let bears know that you have available food. Hazing the bear is going to become really important. So I understand. I mean, I have spent a lifetime tracking wildlife and how amazing it is when we get to see it and see them and be with them. But if this bear is coming too close and becoming too habituated, it's not safe for the humans, nor is it safe for the bear. So hazing the bear, shouting at it, banging pots, throwing things at the bear, so that bear remains afraid of humans. In an ideal world, there would be a lot more interaction, but we live in a challenging time right now for both wildlife and humans. So um, knowing that they're there but not in our spaces is really the best bet at this stage that we're in. And I don't know if that got to your question, but please feel free to email me. And also, we would love to collect scat in Cazadero so that we can start to get more information there, and maybe you can help us with that, whomever you are.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Megan. We're at time now, and just want to let our audience know that this is just a really fun way that we are sharing information and connecting as organizations. And stay tuned, because we do hope to have some sort of scat collection transect across our preserves. And so there's a need to, really understand bear behavior on the coast a little more clearly and closely. And so we're excited to work with Megan in that regard, especially just as scat is detected. And if you're hiking, let us know. Megan and Jill, if you have any other closing thoughts about getting involved and supporting our groups or other bear tidbits, I welcome any last sharings.
Yeah, just please reach out. I'm always interested in your bear stories and helping communities to better understand. And really, thank you. I'm honored that you're so curious and want to learn about this non-human world that we get to be part of. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you and good night. I'm going to close the webinar and say thank you.